And we're live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining this iBiology and NRMN hangout. Today, we are going to be hosting a live question and answer session. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today is building your own research program. So a few housekeeping items. You can ask questions. We're now trying this YouTube Live feature, and YouTube Live has a live chat feature. You can ask your questions there. You can also send your questions over social media, over Twitter, using the hashtag iBioHangout. I'll be monitoring questions on the live chat and on Twitter as well. So please send your questions. This hangout is presented to you by iBiology, and it's also in collaboration with the National Research Mentoring Network. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce my panelists. Let me see. Let me look for the bios. So I'm going to keep it short, just so that we have more time for our questions. Okay, so first up, we have Dr. Cynthia Warwick. She is a pharmacist and health services researcher with 20 years of higher education experience and as faculty and administrator. Her current research is focused on methods to increase diversity in the biomedical science pipeline. She is the founder and president of the Society for Diversity in the biomedical sciences. We have Mr. Steve Sosland, who is with the University of North Texas Health Science Center. He joined them in 2013 to focus on helping the team transition to a values-based coaching, culture, and conduct leadership development. Prior to joining the University of North Texas Health Science Center, Mr. Sosland served as Chief Operating Officer of Hill Country Memorial Hospital in Fredericksburg, Texas. And last but not least, we have Dr. Upender Mane. He is a professor of pathology and senior scientist in the Department of Pathology at the University of Alabama at Birmingham Comprehensive Cancer Center. He is also a senior scientist at the Minority Health Disparity Research Center at UAB. Okay, and I guess I should introduce myself. I am Monica Felio-Mojer. I am the Science Outreach Program Manager for iBiology, and I am also Vice Director for Ciencia Puerto Rico.
Okay.
So with introductions out of the way, let's jump into the topic of the day, building your own research program. So before we went live, I was talking with our panelists a little bit, and I was telling them I'm a scientist by training, but I am not a research scientist anymore. So when I think at some point I was thinking about having my own research group. I was thinking about having my own research lab, and thinking about how to do that seemed a little bit daunting. Most of us go to grad school, at least at the beginning, thinking that we are going to end up in academia. And for the most part, I would say, graduate school is about training to become an independent scientist, and then you can do many things with that, among them having an academic researcher career. So, but when I think about establishing your own research program, it can seem a bit daunting. And so what we want to do today is kind of make it less so. So I would like to ask our panelists, when you're thinking about becoming an independent researcher and building your own research program, what are some key elements for that? What are some key elements that go into creating your research program and becoming an independent researcher? And I'll start with you, Cynthia.
Let me unmute. Well, I think there are a number of things you should do. First, I'm going to take for granted that you're very familiar with the literature in your research area of focus, and that you look for an area that's hot, in terms of where NIH's strategic plan is going. And that means that if you're linking your research ideas to the NIH strategic plan, you're more likely to be able to generate some funding. And that's where you have to identify an appropriate mentor, someone who's already established doing the kind of research that you're interested in, and then reaching out to them, either yourself or through your chair, your dean, your advisor, to explore a way that you may collaborate or visit with them in their research program and try to get information about what kinds of things do they think are going to be the next step in either their research or your interest. And I can stop there and we can have a conversation about what all that means.
Okay, Steve.
Well, I'll probably take things a different direction than Cynthia and Upender will, because Monica, as you said, you're a professional scientist. I'm a professional disruptor. My role at the Health Science Center and my role that I've had for 36 years is working with organizations to build teamwork and to build high-performing teams, whether that's a small team or a large team. And so the things that I would say in answering your first question, I'll keep it simple and say that I would recommend 3 priorities, and that is people, processes, and then the science and technology. And it's so natural in a lab environment to start with the technical competencies in science first, because that's where your passion is as a researcher. But certainly it's, and as we continue to grow in the research science field, no person's an island. Everyone is working with others. And so I think it's really important to look at the personal relationships and to set some parameters around those people that you're going to choose to be on your team, and to find not just their competence, but what are their cultural values that align with you. And find the right people first. That's one. Second is, what processes are you going to put in place with your people, like communications, meetings, expectations that you're going to have around contribution and time, and even time and effort reporting, and the other things that are part of the standards that you'll set. What are those processes, and get those in place. And by having the people and processes first, then it frees you to be able to focus on the science and technology and be able to move forward in your field. So I'm going to come at these answers from a people perspective or a leadership perspective, because that's my background. But I certainly yield to you and Cynthia and Upender for the science.
That's wonderful. I really like the professional disruptor title. I think that's wonderful, and we can get more into what that means. But as you're mentioning, when we're training as researchers, our focus predominantly is about the science. And I think one of the challenges I have seen with many people transitioning into building their own research program and leading their own research group is that they don't necessarily have training in the people and processes aspect of it. So I think that'll be an interesting topic to go into later. Upender.
All right. Hello, everyone, and I am glad to be part of this network, and I'll be glad to share whatever the little knowledge I gained over a period of 30 years as a researcher. And again, I completely agree with Cynthia and Steve about the approach, but I would like to add that the developing a research project, it depends on at what stage of your scientific career you are. if you are a graduate student, you need to look into different aspects. If you are a postdoc, your needs and requirements and strategies should be different. And if you are a junior faculty, your approach should be different. However, I can see the 3 Ps, what Steve just mentioned, people, process, and science, they perfectly can be applied at every level. Like, for example, if you are a graduate student, you just graduated from undergrad college and looking for the scientific career. The first and foremost thing what I do, if am I ready to invest my whole life or my future in this scientific field or in the research field? That is, if as a graduate student, that's the first question comes to my mind before I contacting the people, before I select the field of science I want to pursue. Then if I'm a postdoc, you already have some sort of background. And you know, you spent already 4 to 5 years of your time in a particular area. How to build, utilize that background to build further, that is for the postdoc. If you are a junior faculty, you know by the time you've already gone through the graduate school, you've gone through the training phase, then you are a faculty, so your expectations are different from your leaders, and given what type of environment you are in and how to come up with. So these are the things in my opinion, it varies from according to the phase you are in which. So we can go back and highlight certain things, how to build precisely what are the skills you need to develop at different stages. We will discuss a bit later. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot for us to unpack here. But I guess I'll start with what's easiest for most people, which is, the science. That's what comes natural to most researchers. You're thinking, there's a question or particular area that you're constantly thinking about, and it is the curiosity for answering questions in your field of study. That's what drives most people. And so, when you're thinking about building a research program, becoming an independent scientist, you have to pick a question, right? Like, what is it that you want to answer? What is that question or area of science that you want to pursue for the next decade or decades as a scientist? And I think, Cynthia, you alluded to this at the beginning. One way to find that area, that niche that's going to be yours, is to think about, well, what's hot? What is the latest? What are some of the up and coming questions in science? But I think something that you mentioned that's really important, and that it's a little bit more challenging now perhaps than it was 10 or 20 years ago, is thinking about funding. So, there's, how do you select that questions besides maybe looking at what's hot, and in terms of funding, what other factors do you have to take into account when deciding, this is the area of science in which I am going to pursue my research program?
Well, I've worked with a lot of graduate students and junior faculty in trying to connect them with mentors to help them with developing those types of research ideas. And, and what limits a lot of this science is whether there's some funding out there for whatever it is you're interested in doing. And so, unfortunately, that's the world we live in. And it's not difficult to find out who's funded, because NIH has the reporter. And so if you get pretty proficient at searching the reporter on the website, you can really narrow down the folks who are really at the top of their field in that area. And then you look at their publications and see who their collaborators are and see where they're located, and read those topics and try to look in that direction and see what's interesting to you, because in developing your own research, it needs to be something that's interesting and motivating and that you're passionate about, because you're going to spend a lot of time working on these topics. And so it needs to be something that you're willing to devote the time and the energy on, so that you can really get your own program started. But, you know, I sit on the Health Services Organization Delivery Study section, and you know, the first thing we look at is a biosketch, and we look to see, you know, if you have publications in the area where you're researching, and we're looking to see if your mentors or the team that Steve talked about have that expertise, if you don't have it, and that they have a track record of doing the types of things that you're interested in doing, and if they're, you know, demonstrate in the application that they're willing to provide that kind of guidance. I think that team approach is critical, as Steve mentioned, but, you know, ensuring that you're willing to devote that time is I think the major priority, because it is time consuming. It's not something that you do on a 9-to-5 basis. And this is something that, you know, after you leave the lab or after you leave your office, that you're going to go home and maybe have some dinner, and then you're going to go on the NLM site on PubMed and start looking through stuff and start thinking about, you know, where your idea fits in the whole scheme of things.
Yes,
I don't
Steve
want to take up everybody's time.
Steve or Upender, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I completely agree with Cynthia that when you are developing a project, your track record means a lot. You know, I also serve on K Awards, Trainee Awards, NIH Study Section as a permanent member. It is really important, like what type of publications have you published any in that particular area of research you are proposing? What is your background? How many years you spent on that one? And for me, actually, you know, Cynthia briefly touched like how to develop your own niche, because, you know, when you are with mentor as a graduate student or postdoc, how similar you are with your mentor, how different you are. I know all of a sudden, whole like 4 or 5 years you spend on one molecule. For example, I'm a biologist. So if you worked on one molecule, you worked thoroughly on the signaling pathways and eventually took to the last clinical outcome. And all of a sudden, if you want to become an independent researcher, where you go? Because you spend a lot of time on that. But if I were you, what I did when I was a fellow, I'll develop my own network, which is slightly away from my mentor. For example, he works on prostate cancer and some cancer biomarkers. So what I did, in addition to this traditional biomarkers development and validation, I said, how can I include some extra skills to it? Then at that time in 1996, 94, I went to graduate school as a part-timer and developed my computational skills. And this computational biology, that is, now it is a hot field, but in those 96, 97, no one was talking about it. I applied some of the biomarker data I developed in colon cancer on these algorithms developed by IBM Intelligent Miner. So my mentor is not into this computational biology at all in those days. See, because I know my mentor is a hardcore diagnostic pathologist, I cannot compete with him if I want to stay in the same institution. Because you have to have your own area. And also you look for those mentors, because most of the times what happens, you do your graduate studies in one lab, then move to a different lab for the postdoctoral experience. So that utilize that postdoctoral training period to learn new additional approaches and techniques which you would have not exposed to when you were in the graduate school laboratory. So that, develop new skills. But importantly, what I learned, although my mother tongue is not English, I went to school, I learned how to write scientific writing, grammatic errors. I know everyone can write grammatically right, but scientific writing is different. So that's what manuscript preparation, and give it to your friends in the lab, colleagues, then give it to your mentor with his red pen. In those days, used to rip it apart. And I used to get mad. What the heck this guy is telling me? I'm a postdoc, and I'm coming from a recently well-trained laboratory, but that's not true. You always, I know, mentee-mentor relations always not smooth. We all know that. But today, I have a great respect to my mentor because of those tough things, what he did. So that's what learn, utilize that postdoctoral training period to the fullest extent for developing writing skills, presentation skills, grant writing skills. Even like, when you go for the postdoc, you need to prepare at least 1 year ahead of joining the lab, because some top-notch labs, there's a waiting list, to get into those laboratories. So that's what you need to prepare well enough before you jump into the next level. So I think with that, I'll stop there.
Steve.
Can I mention one thing before Steve? I just, that
Sure.
Upinder said about the critique, the criticism, developing thick skin and willing to put your ideas and yourself out there and listening and taking that criticism, I think was something that a number of people commented on me. They say, you're so brave to put it out there and then listen to these remarks. And my response is, well, everything is peer reviewed. When you put a manuscript out there, when you put an application out there, and you need to know where the weaknesses and the strengths are. And so I like the idea in terms of the red pen. And, I have a number of grad students that came later and said, I'm so glad you made me do this and change this. So I appreciate what Upinder said, and I agree.
Well, Monica, you commented earlier about the fact I describe myself as a professional disruptor. Let me just explain that and then try to tie it back to what both Upinder and Cynthia had mentioned. And that is that as a disruptor, what I mean is that benchmarking and status quo doesn't always do it for us. So a lot of times the comfortable thing is to look and see what have other people done. But the great breakthroughs in science come from trying something that nobody's done before. And it's having the courage to do things differently. And whether that is in how we interact with others, the networks we build, the mentor that I choose that may not be conventional, or the approach that I take on which specialty I'm going to focus on, or which hypothesis that I'm going to try to prove or disprove. So I think that that's what I meant by disruption. Upinder talked about the importance of mentors and networks, and I can't agree more with that, because if we think about where did the term mentor come from? Well, it actually comes from Greek mythology, and when Odysseus went off to the Peloponnesian Wars and left his son with someone that he trusted to raise his son. He didn't know at the time he'd be gone for 20 years. But he left it with someone that he trusted more than anyone. And his name happened to be Mentor. So when each of you think about who are you going to select for your mentor, who would you trust for a 20-year period of time that you could put your faith in that is somebody that's going to hold you accountable, ask you the tough questions, guide you along. And if you can find someone who has that experience ahead of you, then I think selecting that mentor is important. And with networks, I'll tie this back to, I think, really diversity and diversity of thought. The most comfortable thing is to pick somebody who totally agrees with me. And I'll tell you, in my 36 years of experience in work and 58 years of life, I've never learned anything from somebody who totally agreed with me. So what I have learned that I would share with you is that the most important people around me are the ones who disagree with me, who take a different approach, who don't see things like I see. And they are more likely to catch the things that I miss. I've been to talk about that. Find people with different strengths. And to tie into what Cynthia said about the time that we spend at work and the time that we spend at home, a lot of people talk about this idea of quality of life or balance. Well, balance to me is not equal time at work and home. First of all, it's an impossibility. Unless you're a narcoleptic, I don't think you're going to spend as many waking hours with your family as you will at work. So finding what you're passionate about is really critical. And the balance, that, as I see it, is stand on one foot and see how long you can do that. And how long can you be happy doing that? Because it's more about having equal forces in my life, the love and passion that I have at home and the love and passion I have at work. And if those are equal, then I can stay balanced pretty well and be comfortable with it. Last point. There's an author named Marcus Buckingham, and Buckingham has done a lot of work on strengths and weaknesses. He was behind a profile called the Strengths Finder profile, or you might have heard of it as Clifton Strength Finders. And he's later gone on to do other work, but he defines strengths and weaknesses in a very interesting way. He says a strength is something that you're really good at that also gives you energy. So it's the thing, like Cynthia talked about, that you could spend all day at work, go home, have dinner with your family, put the kids to bed, and then get back to your work from home and feel really good and energetic about it. He also describes weaknesses not as something that you're not good at, but it's something that robs your energy. You may be very good at it when you force yourself to do it, like me with paperwork. You know, I can do it, but it's not going to give me the energy of interacting with people for me. So what is it in knowing what gives you the energy to go on for a long time? And then as you bring in your network of people or you hire for your lab and you build your team, find someone who gets strength a different way than you do. And then all of you will find that balance. And that's how I would see this in terms of trying to answer a couple of questions that came through on social media.
Wonderful. So much wisdom. Okay, so I've heard a few important things that I wanna summarize. You know, when you're thinking about becoming an independent researcher, you know, it definitely goes beyond the research. You have to think about the big picture, not just in the science, but you have to think about the big picture of yourself. You know, what are you really good at? What's driving you? What are your strengths, and what are areas in which you actually need support? One place where that support comes from is mentoring, and of course it is very fitting that we're talking about mentoring. First of all, because you for the most part learn how to become an independent researcher from mentors. Research is becoming a researcher is an apprenticeship, and we are in its National Mentoring Month, and also this conversation we are doing it in collaboration with the National Research Mentoring Network. So it's very fitting that we're talking about the importance of mentors. And one thing that I like to think about is not just your research mentor, but really trying to think outside the box. What other mentors can help you develop critical skills that are going to make you a more well-rounded scientist. You know, some people talk about this idea of having your own personal board of directors, you know, having a team of mentors, of people that are gonna not just be able to advise you in terms of your science, but are gonna be advise you and mentor you in terms of your writing, your presentation skills, in terms of your networking skills. You know, it's clear from what you all said that having a network, not just of mentors, but having a network of potential collaborators is going to be really, really important in building that independence. Again, it's not just about that scientific independence, maybe from your graduate advisor or your postdoctoral advisor, but it's also building that independence in terms of skills, in terms of network, and in terms of the approaches that you bring to the table and into your own research program. We have a few questions from the audience who's watching. So one of the questions that I think really ties nicely into what Steve said about, you know, being a disruptor, and, you know, science is really about innovating. So one of the questions that we got from B. Willis is, as a young scientist, how should one manage risk in one's first independent scientific endeavors? Big risky questions in saturated fields, or more predictable questions in less researched areas. So how do you manage risk in deciding where you go with your own research program?
Can I go and make some comments on it?
Yes, go for it.
First, I would like to make a couple of comments on the mentoring, add some points to what Steve already said. The biggest thing in mentoring is that match, perfect match between mentee and mentor. Identifying, and also whether that particular mentor is really matched to your mentality and your type of work, what you're looking at. That is very, very important. I'll give you an example. Like, for example, you send, communication is a huge field in mentoring. How often, how regularly you are communicating, how much time you are giving to the mentors. Mentors are extremely busy. They have, you know, you have to give enough time. But mentor is bogged down with his own administrative or the research responsibilities. He doesn't have time for you. Then quickly you need to realize that, hey, this is outstanding person in my field. However, he's not a perfect fit for me. Because if you're a graduate student or a mentor, you need more supervision or regular constant communication with your mentor. If you are not getting appointments after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's not going to work. That is about mentee, mentor. And also you have to have a clear roadmap. What you want to do, how you want to do, at the end of the training, where you want to end up, what are your future goals. That type of roadmap, you have to have very clear vision or plan for yourself before you go to the mentor. So that's about the mentoring comments. And about this risk taking, again, it depends on the type of field you are in. Like, for example, in biology, always say we discuss in study sections that, oh, this is high risk, high gain. However, it's not supported by preliminary data. Even though R21s and RO3s, they specifically say, these are the beginning grants, early stage grants, they say preliminary data is not required. But to be frank with you, in practical reality, everyone looks that why and how this person is coming up with this hypothesis. What is the basis? Hey, all of a sudden I got an idea in the bathroom and this is high risk. You cannot sell that idea. So you need to come up with a scientific rationale. Then present that, yes, there is some risk involved in it because you are investing time and money, but at the end of the day, you may not get the results of what you anticipated. That's okay. But during that course, you learn a lot of things like the scientific skills, and also you may contribute certain important nuggets of information to the advancement of the science. That is more important. Although you may not be reaching the end point, what you anticipated in the beginning of the, when you are designing the study, that's okay. So that's what high risk in certain fields in biology or genetics, most welcome, because you may fail, but are you in a position to take that risk at what type of career, scientific career you are at? If you are struggling to get funding to establish yourself, get the first faculty position. I know you are a brilliant scientist. When you are with a mentor, you are publishing in Science, Nature, Cell. But when you become an independent investigator, that's entirely a different ballgame. So you have to be very smart where to induct, at what stage of your scientific career you should focus on this high risk taking research. I think that's what my thoughts on that one. I'll stop there.
Well, I can tell you I agree with that, what Upinder said, but I also think that researchers need to be multitaskers, and that you need to prioritize your time and be really good in terms of time management and be able to understand and assess when to focus more time on one thing that may be paying your salary and paying your bills, but carve out some time for these non-traditional and risky areas that may pay off later. So, you can kind of combine those things. So when you're doing your lit reviews and you're writing up for this area, this new riskier area might appear as like, oh, wow, this is interesting. And then that takes you down a road, and you really should go down that road, but you may have to manage your time a little better in order to understand where it's taking you. And just like Steve said earlier, there are all kinds of different mentors. And, if you come across that risky area, you may need to identify another mentor, someone who's doing this riskier area of research, and share with them your interest, and just try to carve out some time where you could start developing a collaboration on the side with that area, so that you can still maintain your work and then also do this other area. Because what I've noticed in terms of research teams, and I think that's what we were talking about initially, that research teams and the folks that I've seen in various institutions, is that that's a group of people, they like to work with each other, and it's really hard to add somebody or take somebody away. They're a pretty cohesive group, and their nuances and culture is matched, like Upinder was saying, the personalities, the willing to devote time and energy to this topic is matched very well, and they know how each other work, and they work together really well. And it's really hard for a new investigator, a new postdoc, a faculty member to enter into that if you don't have an entree to get in that tightly knit group, unless one of those persons is your mentor and they kind of bring you into the team. Then you also should be looking, especially on this riskier side, to who are your fellow students who you like working with, or folks that you've met at a conference or that's doing something very similar, and start developing that other team, that you can sit on, that's going to move you closer to where you want to go. So I think you have to think about this, like in the short term and long term, midterm and long term planning, manage your time effectively and efficiently and prioritize, your interests. Certainly you want to maintain your funding, but then you also want to look to what you want to do in the future.
So, Monica, with permission, I'm going to take this just a bit different angle, because as you introduced me, part of my title is the Chief People Officer. So I'm more focused on the who than the what, and I yield to my esteemed colleagues with Cynthia and Upender to give more of that perspective. I'm going to do a little different. And by the way, welcome everyone. This is the audience participation portion of the webinar. So I'm going to ask everybody to take a piece of paper and a pencil, if you've got it available, take a pen, and I want you to draw an XY axis. And I'm going to talk about risk from a different perspective. And so you have an XY axis. On the Y axis, please label that values and behaviors. And on the X axis, write technical skills and competencies. So that's what we've got. Okay, the Y axis, this is the cultural side. This is the values. The X axis is the technical side. So inside of that, put a 2x2 matrix. Just draw that. And so now you've got 4 quadrants. And what I'm going to ask you to think about is, if you could categorize the people that you work with into one of these 4 quadrants, let's decide what we do with that and see how that relates to risk of a laboratory team. So let's start with the upper right-hand quadrant. Monica, will you play along with me on this? You represent the audience? Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question. If you'll unmute, Monica, here's the question. If we look at the people that fall into the upper right-hand category, that quadrant, that means that they're high on cultural values and behaviors. They're also high in technical skills. My question for you is, what do we do with those people? What would you want to do with those people?
What would I want to do with those people whose values and technical skills are matching best to mine?
That's right, very high. This is exactly what you're looking for. What do you do with them?
I feel like that's a trick question.
It's not. It's actually the simplest of the questions. Okay,
well,
what would you want to do?
You want them on your team.
Yeah, so we fight to retain them, right? We promote them. We help them to move along their careers as quickly as possible. We get them into the positions. We give them the lead technical writing. We do the things that we can to help them, because these are our star performers. These are our A players. So we promote and develop them. Okay, let's go to the other end diagonally. Let's go to the ones in the bottom left. These are the ones that are low on values and low on technical skills. And sometimes, hopefully we never have them, but when we do, we want them off the bus as quick as possible. Cut your losses. It was a mistake. So those people go off. Those two are kind of easy to understand. Let's go to the upper left. So upper left says these are really high values people. They don't have the technical skills or experience yet. So in the upper left, these are the ones that we train, we develop, we take more time, we give them more mentoring, we make sure that they've got all the tools that they need to be successful, but because they're high values and aligned with us culturally, we spend a little more time with them. But here's the question, and the whole purpose of me bringing this up, because this is where the risk is, the bottom right quadrant. The ones with the highest amount of technical skills. These are our star researchers. But they're not culturally aligned. Mm-hmm. They may even abuse people. They may harass people. They may rob people of their time and send them home upset. What do we do with them? Well, in most organizations, what do? We protect them. Oh, they've got an R01 grant. Oh, they've got NIH funding. Oh, they're bringing in so much funding, we can't afford to lose them. And my response is, we can't afford to keep them. That's where risk lies in the laboratories that I see. It's understanding who we really want on board and how many people can we get in the upper right-hand quadrant. So as I look at risk from the people perspective, this is how I look at it. So for what it's worth.
That's a very good analysis and explanation. Outstanding. I couldn't agree more. You are on the dot. Precisely, that's what, this is about. This plotting should be done even for the not only the students, the senior faculty are the mentors. That's what the majority of the issues, the conflicts between the trainees and the mentors come up because of these issues. And you are 200% right that always management support those right quadrant top one, because they are bringing money, but they do not have interpersonal skills. I think that is that cohort need to be properly trained for how to work as a team player, and not only the team player, develop certain other qualities. And also I would like to add, I think that type of cohort we can minimize when they were trainees, when they were going through the training. You need to expose them to this teamwork, working with others, help others and take support from others. That is equally important. I see some people, they are brilliant scientists, but they don't want to work with others. They work in silos. That's not going to be. Now, everyone is talking about transdisciplinary team science, team science, team science. And if you are in team, definitely you will acquire those traits, and that way you can minimize that size of that cohort, what you described on the right corner of your graph. So I think that is a very important issue you raised.
Thanks. And I would simply say that the bottom right quadrant represents the most dangerous people in an organization. So like you said, Upinder, if we can make the behavioral change, then that's great, but behavioral change is really tough. Otherwise, find the organization that doesn't put up with that. We're working hard at the University of North Texas Health Science Center to eliminate those behaviors in the bottom right quadrant. So thank you for what you added.
And also I would like to make some comments to all levels of trainees, like be proactive, take advantage of the opportunity what you have, whatever the lab or the library or the infrastructure. Raise questions and concerns. You need to learn now during undergrad level or postdoc level. If you see something going wrong, you need to raise questions and concerns. Don't keep quiet. In a nice way, not always in a confrontational way, but hey, you go what? A mentor is always expecting that my PCR reaction should be like this and this should be the product, because he's the one comes up with the idea, but that's not going the same way what he is anticipating. So for that, sir, no, you suggested, but it's not going in that direction. You have to develop those skills to raise questions and concerns, but stay the course. Don't always, some people what do, they jump from one place to the other place because lack of their commitment and their lack of stay focusedness. That's what I always say, stay the course. And maintain the professional relationships with everyone, right from lowest level to the highest level. And, try to involve yourself in, if you're a postdoc and if your mentor is hiring some other members, you involve how this gentleman is hiring, what are the qualities he's looking in the biosketch, so that you can go back and improve your biosketch and be upfront and prepare yourself to go to the next laboratory. So these are the things I learned. I was trying to, copy or shadow my mentor when I was going through that trainee period.
That's a really wonderful perspective, Steve. One of the things that I thought about as you were talking, and I was doing this little exercise, was science is not a solitary exercise. We tend to think that you're becoming an independent researcher. So as a principal investigator, you are the one driving, and it's mostly on you. But the reality is that science is not solitary at all. It's a people endeavor. You need mentors, you need collaborators, you need the people in your lab so that you can really be successful. And I think one of the areas, as I mentioned previously, when you are training as a researcher, there is a lot of focus on the technical skills and the not just the doing the experiments, but thinking about the experiments, the technical writing, maybe the technical presentations. And I think in talking to people around me when they've gone on to create their own research programs, time and time again, one of the most challenging things, and that they've mentioned that their training didn't prepare them as well for, is dealing with people. And so, this question specifically for you, Steve, but also Cynthia and Upinder, how do you begin to develop those management and people skills that you're maybe not going to get as explicitly from your research training, but that are incredibly important for your success? How do you begin developing those?
Let me just do this real briefly, because I know we're running short on time, and I want Upinder and Cynthia's perspective. I'd like to listen to that. So I'm going to give you a short answer to this. There's a book, it's titled 12, and then the subtitle is The Elements of Great Managing. The 12 Elements of Great Managing. I'm not recommending that everybody goes out and reads the book, but let me tell you what's in it. This is the Gallup surveys, the Gallup poll that conducts the most broad survey of engagement of organizations, has narrowed it down to 12 questions. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll provide J.K. Vishwanath with those 12 questions in his office. And then he can provide them to you and anyone who's interested through your network of those who, I would say, whoever gives us feedback on how we did today, okay, as a prize can get the 12 questions. That's where I'd begin. If you can focus on trying to manage that way, and if you can just work hard every day to get better at those 12, whether it's recognizing people for their work or giving them feedback or other things, it is common sense, but it's not common practice. Anybody who can do these 12 things effectively will be among the greatest lab managers and leaders that I know. And I'll send that just as soon as we're done.
Awesome, and we'll put that on our website with the recording of this video so that people have access to it. Cynthia or Upinder?
Yes. I agree with Steve. I mean, I think leadership training, leadership workshops, reading books on leadership is very important, because you don't get those what they call soft skills if you're focusing on the science so much, and sometimes if you have a close-knit group, you don't develop those skills that you need to work with people from different cultures, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, people from different regions of the country. There are all these different kind of nuances, and I really appreciate Steve's recommendation. I don't know if I've seen that book, but I've seen other of the series of leadership and strength and, Good to Great and all of those books like that. And then the opportunity in your professional organizations to participate in leadership fellowships, because I think that leadership perspective and understanding what it takes to be a good leader and a good follower and a good listener and a good Indian, all of those things are really critical to know when you wear which hat and how you are able to be respected and respectful of others. So I like that question.
Sure, I agree with Cynthia and Steve. I would like to add one more. I know leadership is an entirely different topic. We can talk for hours and hours. But what I learned, I think from the history, you can learn a lot, the patterns, and based on that, you can keep improving your management skills. That's what history means. What happened like now today, I'm a mentor. I'm graduated several graduate students, 18, 20 postdocs and clinical fellows. But always I go back and see history. Hey, what happened in this situation? How I dealt with this personality, and use that knowledge for the future. I think that is one additional point I would like to add is learning from the history and using that for the better management. That's one. And also I would like to change a little topic here, and from the management, I would like to add one or two statements. I know it's already 56, now 4 more minutes we have. That is, even for the now junior, now you're always looking for the career development. Once you develop and start establishing and becoming a mid-level scientist, how to sustain is a huge issue. And I know the senior Cynthia and Steve can add to it, because for getting one grant doesn't mean anything. You know, for beginners R21, it lasts only for 2 years. Then what next? And R01, you get for 5 years. What next? So what I learned, and this is a statement made by my dad, who was a professor of English in a university. He said, you need to reinvent after every 5 years. Otherwise, you never sustain in the field, whatever the field you are. Always reinvent yourself. Keep adding something new to your profile. Otherwise, oh, you know, this gentleman is doing this work for the last 30 years, nothing brought him to the clinic. I'm telling about my type of work. Then your grant applications are trashed left and right. But if I keep adding some innovative technology, that's what I say, reinvent yourself for every 5 years. So that's what I would like to pass on. So I'll stop there.
That's good.
Awesome. Okay, so you've shared an incredible amount of wisdom and very diverse perspectives. I feel like I've learned a lot today. Unfortunately, we have just a couple of minutes left. And so what I want to ask each of you is to very briefly offer a piece of advice. You know, I feel like as a researcher, as you're approaching that that point of independence, there's a lot of common pieces of advice that you may hear about. But you know, what is that one skill or that one piece of advice that very few people think about, but that in your experience as a researcher or working with researcher is really important to keep in mind? So what is that one thing, you know, that I wish I had known this when I started my research lab or my research program, that people should keep in mind?
I'll keep mine very brief. Be interested, not interesting. Focus on listening to others, empathize, and as researchers, we will learn so much more about the world around us, about the science and nothing. Be interested, not interested.
Can I make my comment is, this is a very hyper competitive environment. Whatever the field you are, whatever the position you are looking for, wherever your research is going to take, you are living in a hyper competitive world, and you need to prepare yourself well. Think at least 5 to 10 years beyond what you are now. So that's what planning and looking for the future, and that's what I suggest.
I would say don't take rejection personal. Don't give up. If someone you reach out to says they don't have time, just move to the next person. Don't think it's something that's negative about you, that they felt that they didn't have the time to devote. We don't know what's going on. Everyone has a lot of different things going on in their professional life and their personal life. And I would say, just, you know, move on to the next person, smile, thank you, I appreciate, you know, your time, and then just move on and don't give up. Just keep at it, and you'll find the right team, the right group, the right mix, but don't be so discouraged or frustrated that you give up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, with that, that's the end of our time together. I would like to thank Cynthia, Steve, and Uppender for their time and for their wisdom, for their advice. This was a great conversation. I also want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions. We will be posting, so this conversation, the recording of this conversation will be available on iBiology's YouTube channel, is also going to be available on the iBiology.org website. You will also see it on social media. I would like to thank our partners at the National Research Mentoring Network. If you haven't registered with NRMN, that is actually a great way to have access to a variety of research, of resources for your development as a scientist and as a researcher, including finding mentors, professional development workshops, videos, etc. So go to the NRMN.net website and check it out. And it will be until next time. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.